The metal scraping against stone, that is the sound of a rose's true nature. Most people hear the rustle of silk when the wind catches a bloom, but if you lean in during the dead hours of a humid July night, you hear the raspy, dry click of lignified thorns pressing against one another. It is the sound of a predator adjusting its stance. The air in a dense rose garden at 3 a.m. isn't just sweet. It is heavy, almost viscous, vibrating with a chemical complexity that modern science is only beginning to untangle. We have been lied to for centuries, told that the rose is a passive symbol of fragility and romance. In reality, the rose is a masterpiece of biological engineering, a sessile hunter that uses the very concept of beauty as a camouflage for a sophisticated, nitrogen-seeking survival strategy. To understand the rose, one must stop looking at the petals and start looking at the soil beneath the thorns. Observe the architecture of the prickle. Unlike a true spine, which is a modified leaf, the rose's thorn is an emergence of the epidermis, a physical extension of its skin. These hooks are curved downward for a reason. They are not merely for defense against herbivores, they are climbing grapples designed to snag the flesh of anything that wanders too close. In the wild, a rose thicket is a graveyard. Birds, small rodents, and even larger mammals get caught in the recursive grip of these hooks. As the animal struggles, it tears its skin further, eventually dying of exhaustion or infection. The carcass rots exactly where the rose needs it, at its feet. The rose is an opportunistic carnivore feeding on the slow decay of those foolish enough to be mesmerized by its scent. I remember a story from the archives of a forgotten monastery in the Black Forest, dated roughly around 1348. There was a monk, Brother Anselm, who was obsessed with distilling the absolute essence of a wild Damascus variety that grew near the abbey's charnel house. He noted in his parchment that the roses near the burial pits were not just larger, they were angry. Their scent was so potent it caused the younger novitiates to faint during evening vespers. Anselm spent 72 days locked in his laboratory, surrounded by mounds of petals. He wasn't just making perfume, he was attempting a spiritual distillation, a way to capture the mercury of the plant, the volatile spirit that gives the rose its hypnotic power. On the 73rd day, they found the laboratory door splintered from the inside. Anselm was gone. The only thing left was a single vial of deep, viscous fluid that shimmered with an unnatural, bruised purple hue. The floor was covered in rose stems that had somehow rooted themselves into the stone cracks within hours. The journals he left behind didn't speak of flowers. They spoke of the breath of the red lion, a gas emitted by the blooms that, when inhaled in high concentrations, dissolves the boundary between the witness and the witnessed. Anselm claimed the roses were whispering the geometric secrets of the stars, using the scent to bypass the human nose and plug directly into the limbic system, rewriting his memories of what it meant to be human. This is the biochemical dissonance we ignore. The primary volatile compound, phenylethanol, is a potent sedative in small doses, but in the concentrated environment of a blooming hedge, it acts as a dissociative. It lowers the heart rate and thins the blood. When you walk into a rose garden and feel that sudden, overwhelming wave of peace, you aren't experiencing spiritual enlightenment. You are experiencing a mild plant-induced narcosis. Your guard is down, your critical thinking is muffled. You are exactly where the rose wants you, compliant and stationary. The geometry of the rose is equally predatory. If you look at a rosebud before it unfurls, you see the Fibonacci sequence executed with terrifying precision. The petals are packed under immense turgor pressure, sometimes exceeding several atmospheres of force. This isn't just growth, it's a coiled spring. When the rose opens, it doesn't just bloom, It releases a sudden burst of pent-up kinetic energy that atomizes the essential oils stored in the microscopic glandular hairs on the underside of the petals. This creates a localized cloud of scent, a pheromonal trap that hangs in the still air, waiting for a host. There was a woman in the high deserts of New Mexico in the late 1990s, a botanist who lived alone in a house surrounded by a rare strain of black roses she had recovered from an abandoned Victorian estate. She stopped answering her phone, stopped visiting the local market. When the authorities finally performed a welfare check, they found the house completely overtaken by the vines. They had grown through the floorboards, winding around the furniture like wooden snakes. She was found in her sunroom, sitting in her favorite armchair. She wasn't dead in the traditional sense. She was in a deep, catatonic stupor, her skin pale and cool. The roses hadn't harmed her, they had integrated with her. The thorns were gently resting against her veins, and the air was so thick with the scent of cinnamon and old blood that the officers had to wear respirators to keep from losing consciousness. She later claimed that the roses were feeding her images, vivid, panoramic views of the Earth's crust and the slow, grinding movement of tectonic plates. She had lost the ability to speak English, communicating instead through a series of rhythmic, breathy exhales that mimicked the swaying of the bushes in the wind. She had become a part of the garden's collective memory, a human processor for the plant's ancient, terrestrial intelligence. When you bring a rose into your home, you are inviting a silent observer into your sanctuary. The plant is hypersensitive to the infrared spectrum. It sees your body heat. It monitors the carbon dioxide levels in the room, adjusting its own respiration to match yours. This is the symbiotic dialogue that most people mistake for simple growth. If the rose is dropping leaves despite being watered, it isn't dying. It is shedding mass to focus its energy on its sensory arrays. It is listening. The ritual of planting a rose must be handled with the gravity of a blood covenant. You do not simply dig a hole and drop it in. You must prepare the earth by acknowledging the transition of life. The soil must be rich in memory, compost that has fully broken down, returning to its primal elemental state. When you place the root ball into the dark earth, you should do so in total silence. Do not speak. Do not play music. The rose needs to calibrate itself to the specific resonance of your home's foundations. If you talk during the planting, the plant will imprint on the vibrations of your voice, and its growth will be erratic, forever searching for the source of that sound. Instead, watch the leaves. A rose speaks through the angle of its foliage. If the leaves are tilted upward at a 45-degree angle in the morning, the plant is inhaling the ambient static electricity of the atmosphere. It is charging its internal batteries. If the leaves are drooping despite the soil being moist, it is rejecting the energy of the room. It has sensed a discord, an argument, a hidden grief, a lie told within its presence. The rose is a master of emotional thermography. It knows when the mercury in the house is off balance. Most people fail with roses because they treat them like decorations. They prune them aggressively, trying to force them into a symmetrical, pretty shape. This is a profound insult to the plant's intelligence. Every time you cut a stem, the rose undergoes a systemic shock that alters its chemical output. A pruned rose is a traumatized rose, and its scent becomes sharper, more acidic, a warning. If you want a rose to truly flourish, you must use the secret of the whispered knot. You do not cut, you guide. You use soft hemp twine to gently bend the stems into horizontal patterns. This breaks the apical dominance, telling the plant that it is safe to expand. In response, it will release a softer, more complex aroma, the mercury of a contented predator. There is a forgotten myth among the nomadic tribes of the Levant about the first rose. They say it wasn't created by a god of love, but by a god of silence. The first rose was white and had no scent. It was a blank slate. But as it witnessed the first human betrayal, it turned red with the heat of the blood spilled near its roots. It grew thorns not to protect itself, but to remember the pain it had seen. The scent was the final addition, a gift from the wind, so that humans would always be drawn back to the scene of their own history, unable to resist the pull of the very thing that documents their flaws. The danger of the rose is not in the sting of the thorn. That is a superficial wound. The real danger lies in the thorn's breath, the invisible molecular invasion of your own mind. When you spend enough time in the company of an ancient, unpruned rosebush, you begin to realize that your thoughts are no longer entirely your own. You start to dream of deep, dark earth and the slow, rhythmic pulse of the seasons. You find yourself standing in the garden for hours, staring at a single bud, waiting for that microscopic twitch of movement. The rose doesn't want your admiration. It doesn't care about your poetry or your bouquets. It wants your presence. It wants the carbon dioxide from your lungs and the warmth from your skin. It wants to be the silent witness to your life, slowly weaving its way into your environment until the boundary between the flower and the home vanishes entirely. You must be careful. If you find yourself waking up with the faint scent of crushed petals on your skin, even when there are no flowers in the room, if you find small red scratches on your forearms that you don't remember getting, it is already too late. The rose has decided that you are a suitable host. It has begun the process of distillation. You are no longer just a gardener. You are the vessel. And the rose, in its cold crimson brilliance, is finally starting to bloom.